have a few public conversations, and then we are also meeting with stakeholder groups. UU Ministry for the Earth is an important stakeholder group, especially because the seventh principle is so important to so many Unitarian Universalists. So this meeting tonight is to, one, to introduce you to the work that we are doing, and two, to engage in some conversation with a few people who are a part of the ongoing work that we've been doing, certainly for the past year. And the third and maybe most important piece is to gather feedback from you, which we plan to do this evening as well. So that's our main purpose. The information that we get will be considered in an overall proposal for Article 2. We are to present that to the UUA Board of Trustees in January 2023. They will then bring it to the General Assembly in June of 2023. And they'll bring it for a vote, but it has to be voted on twice. So it will come back around in June of 2024. Now, some of you may have questions about the mechanics of all of that. And tonight, we really don't have the time to get into that, but I'm sure that you can find more information on it. So with that, let's get going. All right, Rob, we're not too far off time. So we will continue. Thank you. And first, I want to thank the people who said yes to our invitation to engage in a conversation before we open the process for your feedback. Okay.
Yeah. And the way we're doing this is to have this conversation ahead of time, and then we'll gather feedback from everyone else through an online survey link. So you have time to sort of compose your thoughts and think of them. But we found it useful in that covenant conversation to ask some people to think through some of these things first, to spur people's thoughts, right? And so this is the first question I'd like to address to the panel, which is.
Wait a minute, Rob. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I should introduce the panel.
You should. Yeah.
That was a part of my my charge. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Reverend Aileen Fitzke, who currently serves the Unitarian Universalist Church of Sterling, Virginia. Well, they can see your name, but raise your hand. Good, thank you. Aileen received her Master's of Divinity from Harvard Divinity School in May of 2018. She did her ministerial internship at the UU Church in Binghamton, New York. She was co-ordained by the Binghamton Congregation and First Unitarian Society of Ithaca, which is her home congregation. She also has a Master's of Arts in Feminist Spirituality from Immaculate Heart College Center in Los Angeles. And she holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Biological Sciences from Rutgers University. Among her work experiences, she has been a biological researcher and a professional Unitarian Universalist religious educator. She likes to be outdoors and spends her spare time creating gardens. A woman after my own heart. I studied horticulture. She's married to her spouse, Carl, and has 2 grown sons. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Reverend Petra Thombs. Petra, will you raise your hand so people can see you? There she is. Petra is the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Central Nassau in Garden City, New York. She received her Master's of Divinity, and I don't have your date here. Petra retired from 32 years of working in the New York City Department of Education before attending seminary. Most recently, she served as the executive director of the Ramapo Lenape Community Center and continues there as an educational consultant. Reverend Petra turned to Unitarian Universalism in 2002 and became a member of the community Unitarian Universalist congregation at White Plains, New York. Ordained by her home congregation in May 2021, she continues to focus on informing communities about the doctrine of discovery, advocating for Indigenous rights and healing Mother Earth. She enjoys writing poetry and creating arts and crafts. Reverend Petra and her husband, Bernie, have been married for 41 years and reside in Valhalla, New York. Their sons are Benjamin and Matthew, and they have a grandson and a cat. Thank you for being here, Petra. And our third panelist will be Reverend Daniel Lalore, who, now Daniel, you know I don't have your bio, so Daniel will have to tell you a little about himself, but Daniel is relatively new to the staff of UU Ministry for Earth and relatively new as an ordained minister too. Daniel, tell us just a little about yourself and then we will continue.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here. I am new on the staff of UU Ministry for Earth. I've been part of the team since August, but before joining the ministry as a ministerial intern in Boston, we really connected with just the Harvest the Power and so many of the programs that Ministry for Earth is known for. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island originally. I lived in California for several years, so hello to anyone from the Bay Area and the San Francisco congregation. And now I'm here, so I'm just very happy to be present and coming from Lenape land in what is now known as Brooklyn.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, Rob.
Great. Thank you. This was much less intimidating before I heard the biographies of everybody. It's always, whenever I hear the biography of any given Unitarian Universalist, I'm impressed. That's just generally been my experience. But it's great to have you all in this conversation. I guess I'll direct this question to all of you, but I'll start with Reverend Aileen, since you were a person who two congregations fought over ordaining. So I'll go with that as my marker. But this is a question I'd like all of you to weigh in on, which is why or how is your commitment to the UU Ministry for Earth an important part of your spiritual journey? Right.
Well, for me, the ecological justice, climate justice has been part of my spiritual journey for over 20 years, and UU Ministry for Earth is just a continuation of that. I spent 17 years living in a place called Eco Village in Ithaca, which was an intentional community that focused on sustainability and social justice, and was a place where we put sustainable practices into practice with sharing and with the land, with CSA's, community supported agriculture. We acted as a living fishbowl. We had people from all over the world come and visit us to learn sustainable practices, to learn about sustainable living. And I was also an anti-fracking activist, but particularly with the focus of how anti-fracking is a religious issue, is a religious spiritual issue, and incorporate and gathered people from multi-religious traditions in the work of anti-fracking. Much of our anti-fracking organizing was done within religious communities, within the church communities where I lived. That's where at least where I was living and working, being an activist. Much of our activism work was done in the church communities, the faith communities that were around us, including pulling together groups to talk about this. We brought together a whole group when fracking first started in upstate New York. We brought together a whole consortium of religious leaders, including from the Haudenosaunee Earth Care community, which is the the Native American community, which was in our area, to talk about from the religious perspective, from multiple religions, from Buddhism, from the Native American perspective, from Judaism, from a lot of the Christian traditions. And I was part of a group called Interfaith Action for Healing Earth, which organized events and book groups and reading groups on the spiritual and religious aspects of climate justice and earth justice, and the intersections of those with various other injustices. We did a lot of reading at the intersection of liberation theology and eco-justice.
Yes, Reverend Petra.
Hi, my name is Petra, Reverend Petra. Yes, you know, when you were speaking about fracking, and you know, one of the things that when I received my invitation to join this panel, that came to my mind was one thing that we are focused on in my work with the Ramapo is addressing the issue of stolen sisters, which is a result of fracking, the man camps that are formed, that because they are ravaging the earth, these people who work in these camps on their hours of not working go and pursue the women, and women are kidnapped and women are raped and women are disappeared. This is, you know, as the earth is ravaged, our communities are being ravaged. And this is, it's in order to be able to address this, this is religious work. This is sacred work. This is something for us to pay attention to, something that must stop. We have had so much of an understanding of how young women in the mainstream have been followed in the news, as well they should be. And when our women are disappeared, what happens is the silence and the not knowing, and they're gone. This is something that really is incumbent on us to stand up and to speak out against. And so, you know, our relationship with the earth must be in balance. What happens to the earth happens to the humans. What happens to the humans happens to the earth. When we do injustice to the earth, we are doing injustice to the people as well. And we see this in this example of fracking and what those who work in that industry do to our people as well. And so I just wanted to answer that question with that, because this is something that I've been carrying in my heart for a while, and something that circles of the women's circles and the council that we're talking about. How do we get to address these issues of stolen sisters? And so.
Thank you. And Reverend Daniel.
No, one thing that I'm thinking about is even, I'm from Providence. I mentioned that originally. And when I was growing up, so much of my environment was abandoned mills. And some of those now, we're in a different stage where some of those have become condos or other things, which is very disorienting. But like my childhood memories are just these big abandoned mills, and how the physical environment changed, and our relationship to what was around us is like, don't go play in that park. Like, it's dangerous because of the pollutants or whatnot. And I've had, just as a constant backdrop in my life, people who were, you know, relatives or friends of my parents who just were sick because of some environmental factors and things, or exposure to chemicals at the places they work. And I think that consciousness of space and the care or the lack of space and the people who are, and life that is in it, just, I think, is such religious work and an awakening. And so much is done in our culture, I think, to turn away from that reality that we are connected, that we are part of this interdependent web of existence. And And until there's that awakening, we're just going to continue in these cycles of ache. So I feel like the religious calling is to just invite presence, invite waking up, invite honesty into the situations that we're in, and to really try to embody that care and accompaniment with the joy and sorrow, which is the reality of a lot of spaces that we're in. But that we're the reminder that we're not alone and that we don't have to do this work alone, I think is such powerful religious work. And our calling, really.
So, wrong mic, I'm sorry. Can you hear me okay now? Yeah, good. So each of you have talked about some pretty difficult things, as well as talking about the need for us to look at this as religious work. How do our principles and sources support you and support Unitarian Universalists in making environmental justice and climate justice a part of our theological framing and our institutional work? So how do the principles and sources support you, support us in making environmental justice and climate justice a part of our theological framing and our institutional work? One, if you like to volunteer, or would you like for me to invite you into that? Petra, you look like
You know,
ready.
and we've talked about this before. It comes down to the principle that we're working on, in my mind, is that it doesn't, we have to go forward with action. These principles have to live out loud in reality. And so, you know, I'm leaning into the 8th principle because the action needs to happen. It's the other ones are very well scripted and give us an understanding of who we are, how we need to see the world. But if we do not put them into action, they lay on the page and the book is closed. So in order to be able to make these changes, these systemic changes, so that we come to the current age and we see the problem ahead of us, we see the problem that we're living with, and we actually tackle it. It's because we have decided that we would be active participants, and we cannot go back to thinking about it, to having nice discussions, to being heady, but not active. And so, you know, it demands that we be accountable in that way.
Thank you, Petra. Aileen or Daniel?
No, I think, like Petra said, that the 8th principle is a call to action. Someone pointed this out to me. It's the only principle that we talk that has verbs in it. You know, that
Right.
That
Do
actually, yes, that actually is an aspiration, but also a call to action. And the other principles, while aspiration, like for example, the 7th principle, the interconnected web of all existence. We believe in that, but what does that mean? What does it mean to be interconnected? What does it mean that whatever we do affects everything around us? When I was doing my anti-fracking work, I started studying water systems. And do you know that all water in the world is connected? You know, through rivers, streams, soil, it's all connected. All water is connected. And so no matter where you dump your water, everybody lives downstream. Water is like the whole essence of life. And if you wreck water somewhere, you wreck water everywhere. And so, and so it just shows the interconnection of everything we do. Nothing is localized, everything is connected. And if we don't understand that, and the inherent worth and dignity of each human being, if we believe that it's not just us, our individual community, it's everybody. Everybody's inherent worth and dignity matters. Everybody's health, well-being matters. The oppression of the earth, the destruction of the earth and people is the same destruction as out of control destructive economic systems. It's, and earth systems and water systems and unsustainable food systems. It's all connected in a way that the interconnected web of all existence, it's not just a pretty thing, it's a real concrete thing, and it is a meaningful thing that has repercussions for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. And I mean, give the answer that you want to give, but I also am wondering where the sources play into your framing as well.
Thank you. I'm cheating because I'm reading a line from this wonderful book, which if you haven't, you should get. It's also available online, but Widening the Circle of Concern. And there's a whole section on theology. And the quote I want to read is from Reverend Dr. Sophia Bettencourt, who's former co-president of the association and a wonderful theologian. And she writes, "We are on a journey toward redemption. We have lived a year filled with lamentation, with the strength of generations, the failures of the everyday, and the deep down gritty messiness that is the promise of our salvation. There is an inherent goodness that exists between us and among us. I want to honor the weary, ragged miracle that is our living tradition, the weary, ragged miracle that is our living tradition." And for me, it's just something that points to the reality of lament and loss and the accompaniment. And I hear a lot with in the eighth principle, just naming the beloved community as that aspiration that we're trying to embody really speaks to I think that reality. We're not saying it's perfect, but we're saying that we can accompany one another as we're trying to build this other reality, which is embodied in the interdependent web and recognizes each of our inherent dignity. So someone who wasn't me said we preach the first and seventh principle as a faith, and that was before the eighth principle movement. But I think that vision of wholeness and accompanying one another and building justice, those speak to me.
Okay, well, thank you all. Rob?
I just want to add, can I add one thing? As far as sources, I've been thinking about this a lot. Like we talk about our Jewish and Christian sources and from all the wisdom traditions. And I think it's important for us to realize that Unitarian Universalism doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within the sources of many, many living traditions whose wisdom around environmental justice can very usefully inform our own. I'm particularly struck by, like this, like she's my favorite theologian, like Ivan Gabara, longing for running water, a kind of eco-feminist theology of the earth. Though from a Christian perspective, but her perspective is a really profound and wonderful one, and forms the basis of a really wonderful theological ethic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Rob?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking also now, one of the things we've been concerned about is covenant, right? The principles are technically a covenant that our congregations agree to. And we're thinking about that in a lot of different ways. And I'm thinking also of examples, you talked about, pushing for action, right? And real world examples and somehow how some of these things are actually concrete as well as being, ideal. I'm thinking about like the Green Sanctuary, work that y'all have done as an organization. And thinking about ways of how we know when we're in or out of covenant. How do we set up ways for people to call us in? How do we respond when we are called out / called in on things? And so, I guess my question is that to you all, what is it about our principles, our covenant, our sources that keep us mindful and accountable beyond our own conveniences? And can you all think of examples where, an agreement, either formal or informal, a covenant, has been important?
I wonder if the time when we focus on covenant is when we feel that it's missing, when we feel that something isn't quite right, that the relationship around us does not feel whole. And then we ask, isn't there a covenant to bring us together? I think that a covenant is something that we tend to take for granted until we recognize that it's missing, that we are not feeling wholeness around us, that there is a brokenness. Yes, and I know in congregations that may come up for whatever reason, if people are not seeing each other, not respecting each other, not leaning into, an understanding about the dignity and worth, then we begin to wonder, there's something not quite right here. We have agreements on how we will be together. And that's when we seem to, at least from my view, call up the fact that, wait a minute, don't we have something that's supposed to be we're a part of, that we have agreed to do together, so that this behavior or this interaction would be different, would be helpful and whole, as opposed to giving one a feeling that something is broken.
Rob, will you repeat the question?
Yeah. I'm tempted to refine it again, but I'll try not to, because I thought of another way to ask it. But yeah, how do we know when we're in covenant? How do we respond to calls to be in covenant? And what is it about that, along with our principles and sources, that keep us mindful and accountable beyond our own conveniences? And this could be individual as well as movement or action wise.
I admit, when I saw this question beforehand, it was the one that I really had trouble thinking about. I couldn't think of a response to it. But then I thought, what does it mean what does it mean to be covenantal community, not just within our individual congregations, but as a whole organization? What does it mean to be in covenant? And what does it mean, like, particularly in terms of climate and racial justice? How do those things, what happens when we see examples that we think are out of covenant, but other people see as perfectly okay? And so how do, like, through the Article 2, how do we create that basis? What holds us together? What are those things that we agree to together? And maybe we have to rethink those over again. Maybe we have to break down and create a new foundation of what covenant is. to us. I was talking about this with some colleagues the other day, and I said there's this metaphor of Unitarians about herding cats, you know, because we all think off in all different directions. I mean, but what is it about us that makes us not cats? What is it about us that holds us together in covenant and agreement and forms the basis of our understanding of who we should be together? And maybe I think that's what the Article 2 Commission is, reimagining what that might look like for the future, while letting go of things that don't exactly gel with the past, moving forward in a way to rethink the foundation and the covenant that we have with each other, considering racial justice and climate justice and how we want to change the world. Maybe we have to rethink our entire foundation of covenant.
Yeah. Rob, can I offer here, because we have about 9 minutes before we transition. And Reverend Aileen, you spoke to perhaps the need to reimagine everything around covenant, or a lot around covenant. We are at one of those moments of reimagining, because we anticipate our own transformation, which means we have to change some things now. Our last question for the day is, what do we owe to those who have come before us? And what do we owe to the people who are yet to come? Speaking of covenant, right? And then as you think about your answer to that, what do you need, or what do we need from our association? And I'm not just talking about headquarters, I'm talking about the whole. What do we need in order to do this work to support a sustainable environment and a sustainable living for the future? What do we owe to those who have who've laid the groundwork? What do we owe to those who are coming? And what is it that we need now in order to create this sustainable environment for our living? Daniel, do you want to start?
Thank you. I love that question. I think one thing that stands out to me is just how often thinking about what we owe to those we inherit the faith from is just, even in the last century, how many traditions have grown in congregations and become just widely shared across continents. The chalice lighting, the notion of flower communion, just these things that were not, dictates from any particular program, but really organically met these deep spiritual needs. And I think particularly with environmental justice, Ali Tharp, co-director at UUMFE, has started to elevate like Biodiversity Sunday, like thinking about what is the liturgy look like. William Jones, the late theologian, talked about, I think it was ESP, economic, social, and political liberation. Like, how can we create holidays within our traditions that elevate the values we want to anchor? So I'm just imagining, honoring all the liturgies that we've inherited and creating something for the 21st century we can share across congregations.
Thank you, Daniel. Petra?
I think along the lines of what Daniel has said, we carry those traditions forward. We owe that to those who are now ancestors, who have laid the foundation, and we carry their understanding, and we go deep in making sure we are aligned with their understanding, but we carry it forward and make it relevant for our present day. And we think about something from, indigenous wisdom, the seventh generation to come. Everything that we do has always to be to prepare the earth, to prepare ourselves, to leave a legacy for the seventh generation that we probably will not see. But to know that they are coming, to know that they have a right to be here, and we have the right to we are called to do our part to ensure that they have a world to to inherit. What can the Unitarian Universalist Association as a whole do in supporting? That's a question. I read that question and thought, oh my goodness, well, I'm not really sure. But, you know, for these issues of water and honoring the waters and protecting the waters and fighting against pipelines, we will not be able to do that if we do not have water. That our commitment to the water, to all be water protectors, that is something that we all must participate in, without a doubt. That we find ways to make all of us safe is, how can we do that locally and across this country, let alone, you know, taking on the global issues? How can people be safe? Well, that's a spiritual practice. That means that we'll be confronting corporations such as the frackers in order to keep our women safe. So there is a lot to do. There's a lot of expectation, but in a big way, that's what it needs to be.
Thank you. And Aileen, you get the last 3 minutes.
Okay. I just really love that Daniel said the traditions and the rituals, to be thankful for the ancestors, to be thankful for the foundation that they laid for us, for the traditions and the rituals and all the things that we share together. But I think into the future, we need to be thinking really innovatively and creatively about what church is, or what a religious community is, its purpose, and what it looks like, because it might not look like what it looks like right now. But so I think one of the things that the UUA can support is innovation and creativity, and thinking of ways that we can go forward into the future that might not look like what we have now. And we might not even be able to imagine today what they look like, but someone is going to be imagining that. And to be able to have them have support for whatever that something looks like. And the one last thing I want to say is humility, the ability to just stop and listen beyond our comfort and privilege. Unitarians don't live in a bubble, but we tend to live in a very privileged place, most of us, and to just stop talking and listen to those around us who might have much greater wisdom than we can even imagine.
Thank you all for your reflections and sharing that with us. You've given me some food for thought. I hope that is the case for others too. So Rob is going to provide instructions to everyone for how you can weigh in on some of these questions as well. Rob? You're on mute, Rob. We can't hear you.
Thank you. I'm about to drop in the chat a link, and I'm going to pop it also up. Pop it up in the screen here, which is here. Well, there we are. And I just happened to have this here and wanted to throw this up before I mentioned what to do. This is your all's mission and vision. Just wanted to put that back in front of you for a moment. To be a wellspring of spiritual and educational grounding, practical support for bold, accountable action for environmental justice, climate justice, and the flourishing of all lives. And a vision of a world in which
that's not up on the screen. Did you mean for it to be on the screen?
Yeah, let me, sorry. Are you seeing that now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. The joy of Zoom. Anyway, yes, but your mission, your vision, a world in which reverence, gratitude, and care for each other and for the living earth are central to the lives of all people, right? You all,
Okay.
the seventh principle is something that, all you use, consider. This is something that you all specifically are innovators, are bold in your love for, right? And so we have a reflection link for you here. I put it in the chat. It's easy to type in, bit.ly/UUMFE_survey. And so that's a Google form that hopefully on any machine that you are accessing this on, you can get to. You can do it now. We're giving you about 20 minutes or so to do it now. You can go back to this later, right? But we really want, it's always easier to grab people in the moment, right? You've been inspired by these great panelists who have shared some, wonderful thinking with us on this. But this is the way we're asking you the same questions here that we asked the panelists, basically, right? And then some demographic information at the end to make sure we're reaching all the people at our charge has called us to reach. But yes, take about 20 minutes. Think about what you've heard. And then put those in the survey there, and that will let us gather this so that we can go back and hear from everybody, right? And the problem with an in-person conversation is that some people get to speak and some don't. We're hoping this gives everybody a chance to weigh in. So does anybody have questions? I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Is everybody?
You can click on the link in the chat and go directly to the page. Right?
Yeah, I just didn't want to take it for granted that everybody could get straight from the chat to the thing. But yeah.
And we encourage you all to kind of do this reflection now. Rob, I see one hand up. It's a telephone.
Yeah.
So.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi.
Yeah.
Can you? I had to call in, so I can't.
Right.
Can you say that address again? You said
yeah.
So I can write it down and type it in.
Yes, that address is bit.ly /UUMFE, all uppercase, _ survey. So.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, once you have filled in the form, we invite you to come back to the room. So it'll be about a 20-minute period, right, Rob? Yeah.
Jackie, I see you have a question.
Yeah. So how do I physically do that? I mean, I'm looking at a screen with people on it, and I understand what the link is, but if I click on that, I'm going to go somewhere else, and then I'm not going to be able to get back. I don't understand physically how to do it. Do what you're asking.
Yeah, the Zoom meeting should stay up in Zoom. It may be full screened, and if you look up in the upper, probably right corner of your screen, there'll be an option to exit full screen if you move your mouse around up there. Are you on a PC or a Mac?
A PC.
Yeah. Right. So so move that mouse around up in the upper corner. You should see a exit
thing
full
that says
screen.
view.
And once the recording is available, I would certainly want to go back to that. So as I began this evening's meeting with a prayer, I'd like to end it with a prayer as well. This is actually the reverse of the famous St. Francis prayer, which I would like to now recite. Spirit of life, make me a channel of disturbance. Make me a channel of disturbance. Where there is apathy, let me provoke. Where there is compliance, let me bring questioning. Where there is silence, may I be a voice. Where there is too much comfort and too little action, grant disruption. Where there are doors closed and hearts locked, grant me the willingness to listen. When laws dictate and pain is overlooked, when tradition speaks louder than need, grant that I may seek justice than to talk about it. Disturb us, O Spirit of life, to be with the alienated as well as with the alienated, to love the unlovable as well as the lovely. Spirit of life, make me a channel of disturbance. So with these words, I'd like to invite any of my co-organizers to say anything that if they would like to say.
Yeah. Thank you, Rashid. Rob, will you tell people how they can access the link moving forward?
Yes, I mean, that link is still active. You can share it with, and someone asked earlier in the chat, if I could share it with people in their climate action groups in their congregation. Absolutely. Right. You know, we want to include as many people as we can in our decision making, right, and get as many perspectives as we can. And I think we could also share it again with you all. I know you send out regular email like newsletters in the group. And I do want to mention we also have a general individual survey that we have put out for people that has a broader range of questions. You can we can send that link to you all as well to go out maybe in a newsletter. Just again that had different questions than we asked tonight. Right, the ones we asked tonight were very particular to you all as a group. But yeah, I just want to convey my gratitude to the panelists for their deep thinking and courageous answers to some of these questions, and to you similarly for the thinking and answers you've given us in that survey, and to invite you to join the email list. There was a entry at the bottom of the survey. There are other ways you can be involved in this process, and we will be hosting some conversations at General Assembly this year. And so we hope to see some of you all in those.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And I'd like to invite anyone who would like to drop a note of appreciation to the people who shared, who said yes and came forward to create the conversation with you and to give you their reflections. So thanks again, Reverend Aileen, Reverend Petra, and Reverend Daniel. Thank you, Marcus, too.
Yes, indeed. Without his help, we couldn't have done this.
Yeah.
Have a great evening, everyone.
You too. Take care.
Thanks.
Marcus, give us a moment so people can finish dropping their comments in the chat. Rashid, what a perfect closing you did.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. As I was, I came across this today, but I just saw the headline that the Senate has, of course, rejected the voting right amendments bill. So I felt it was all the more appropriate given the day we are having.
Thank you. I haven't listened to any news. Oh.
Good for you.
Paula and Rob, did you want to debrief, or shall I end the meeting?
Rob?
I'm good.
Yeah.
You know, you and I talk on the regular anyway about stuff. So
Yeah, I'm good. And Rashid
Yeah.
and I will do a debrief too. So we're
We're going
good.
to talk tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Marcus.
Yeah.
You can have the
Thank
rest
you.
of your evening to yourself. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah.
See you all later.
Thank you
okay?
all.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Really great.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate you joining us.
It was great.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.